The Fantasy Six-Pack Hour. With your hosts, Joe Bond.
You're awful.
And AJ Applegarth.
It's Sin Shu Chu. It's a mouthful.
All right. Welcome to the Fantasy Six-Pack Hour. My name is Joe Bond, founder of FantasySixPack.net. With me, my co-host, AJ Applegarth. How's it hanging, man?
Good. I don't know.
I lobbed that one to you, but you didn't take it. Thank you.
I did in my head, and then I said, no, can't do that.
Yeah, as you could tell, I have not gotten my voice back from the Fantasy Football Expo this weekend. It is like 3/4 of the way back, so I figured, why not? And I also I now at least somewhat feel like a normal human being again, not like I spent a week in the desert. It's been a rough comeback for I think a lot of people that went, but it was a blast. I'm so glad I went. So anyway, tonight we are going to be talking about some fantasy football draft strategy. Got a great guest in line for that. We'll introduce her in just a second. But before we get on to that, just want to remind everybody, hit that subscribe button, like button, follow button, leave those comments, whatever it is, the ratings on iTunes and Spotify. We appreciate it, and it goes a long way in helping us out. And then, of course, we cannot move on without letting you all know that we've got memberships available on the site. And right now, the big thing is the draft cheat sheet, the projections that go along with those. We've got all of our rankings behind there. We've got our Discord channel if you are an all access member, along with other in-season content that will be put behind that as well. So we're working on getting a lot of that lined up. So go there. And then, by the way, I don't know, man, check out the new digs, AJ.
I did. I see that.
Yeah, we got our store, man. Hat came in yesterday, so I love it, man. A great fit, by the way. So I love this hat. You can go to fantasysixpack.net/store to check out all of our swag there. So loving it. I'm definitely gonna pick up some more from these guys. But without further ado, let's bring in our guest of the week, and it is none other than Kate Magdziuk, DraftKings, Ball Blast. She's all over the place. Great to have you here tonight, Kate. How you doing?
I'm doing fantastic. I'm excited. We're going to be talking some draft strategy, which this is Christmas essentially for me. You know how there are some people that are like Halloween people. I feel like I don't have that, and I don't celebrate Christmas like that. Like, I'm not a really big holiday person, but this is kind of my holiday. So always excited to talk strategy and break it down step by step to help out the listeners.
Awesome.
Absolutely. No, I'm right there with you. I honestly, I could draft 100 teams, but of course I can't manage 100 teams, so I don't.
Best ball, baby.
Yeah, well, yeah, I kind of fell behind in that this year, and unfortunately, the puppy filled, and puppy 3 filled a little earlier than I thought it would. So I'm waiting for puppy 4, but yeah, I mean, if I could just draft with people, I would do it all day. If they could just manage the teams by themselves, it'd be so much more fun for me. So
it's kind of like hate to eat and run, but hate to draft and run, but
peace, it's on you. Bye.
But I've got 6 more drafts lined up, so I'm out.
Love it.
Yes.
All right, so let's get into things here, but without getting into it first, let's do our favorite segment.
Beer.
So, Kate, I know you don't have a beer, but you do have a brew. What you got?
I do. I
love it.
So, I mean, I accidentally drank my way through my alcohol supply a day early, just pre-gaming this show today. Didn't plan it very well, but I forgot to go to the store. So cold brew. It's still a brew, and that's the way that I'm rolling with this. It's the best I can do, guys, but at least I'll be caffeinated at the end, and I won't sleep for days.
Probably something
it's
I
still
need
a
right
brew.
Now, but
so
still a brew.
we are fans of brews of all kinds. So
AJ, what you got?
I myself am divulging into this beer that I got over the weekend at the expo from none other than producer Mike, and that's the new Glarus Brewing Co.'s Spotted Cow. Can only get it in Wisconsin, and I've never been to Wisconsin, so Mike brought it to us, and here we go.
Nice.
It's delicious.
Live up to the hype.
Oh yeah,
I'm so jealous, you guys.
That's
I can't
nice.
believe you're doing this to me.
sorry, I almost wasn't going to, but
So I'm drinking a 10 Benz beer, 10 Benz Brewing Company. I don't know what it's actually called. I've never heard of it. It's from Vermont. Hubbard Ridge Double IPA.
That was a
Never
quick
had it.
second drink, AJ.
I don't know what you're talking about.
Didn't take him long to recover.
Nope.
Just like Sunday night. Ooh, that's really good. Holy cow. That is
Spotted Cow. It's Spotted Cow, Joe.
This is better. I'm sorry.
Did you already drink it?
That is probably getting like a 4 3/4 on Untapped. That is 4 out of 5, by the way. That is phenomenal. All right, let's jump into things here. Let's get into our draft strategy talk. And I mean, look, let's pretty general question, just kind of right off the top here, Kate. Fairly typical PPR. You could even go half PPR if you kind of want. I think standard's sort of the third wheel here, so we'll kind of ignore that one because that is a totally different strategy if you really want to go that route.
Never heard of her.
Right? 12-team draft, right? Kind of your standard number, I feel like. What is your mindset heading into a draft? Do you have like a plan? You're going like, okay, this is where I want because this is my draft slot. Like this is the way I'm thinking it's gonna roll, or are you just kind of whatever with it, or you kind of like got to get a running back first, got to get a wide receiver first. Are you wide receiver heavy? Are you wide receiver heavy? Like, how do you attack your drafts going in?
I'm kind of like this is not really a strategy, but a lack of strategy is probably how I would describe my strategy. I'm a very big believer of not, necessarily going in with an ironclad plan here. I think you have to be really fluid when you're drafting, and I think that tends to be the teams that I'm happiest with, the ones that I'm not strategizing. Okay, I'm going to do, running back, then wide receiver. So I have a balance, and I want to take the best players available, period, regardless of position. And sometimes that team might look a little wide receiver heavy. Sometimes that team might look a little running back heavy. And then I kind of fill in the cracks at the end of the draft. But I think in terms of like the first 5 rounds, I'm very fluid. And I think primarily, it's not necessarily just drafting like the highest player on the board. It's about, like, do I like these players? My core, I better like my team. Like, I'm not going to draft Cam Akers just because ADP tells me I should draft Cam Akers.
Yes.
And like, this is going to be my team. I'm going to take the best players available that I like. And then the dominoes will fall as they may. But it tends to, I'm always happy with those teams. I'm always happy with those rosters.
Yeah, I'm with you. I don't necessarily go into a draft saying I've got to go this route first. And if you do that, you pigeonhole yourself into probably a bad team, because then you're going to miss on the players that fell. Like I get questions all the time, and I'm sure you do. And, tons of other fantasy analysts do on Twitter and wherever they answer questions like, oh, I have the 10th pick. Should I go running back receiver? Should I go receiver running back? Should I do receiver? Take the best player available. Like take what you like. Like, you never know. You could be crazy, and Austin Eckler could fall to you at 12. But you had your heart set on wide receiver, and then you're going to pass on Eckler. Like, no, come on.
And when you have like these sort of notions heading into the draft, you do make mistakes like that. You'll pass on players because you feel like you're supposed to do something different.
Yes.
And I hate that. I hate doing things like I'm an only child. I don't like being told what to do. So I've lived my life that way, and I draft my fantasy teams that way. But like first and foremost, that's my rule. Take the best players available, but also take players that you like, and don't feel like you have to take players just because they're, other people are high on them.
Yeah.
Or even where it's like, don't pass on a player because somebody told you you're not supposed to take him.
Yes.
Yeah.
Like,
if you want to
You
draft
can
him around
reach.
early, do it. Like it's if you're right, you're right. Like it's your thing. Just another secondary question though on this. Like, okay, let's just kind of say the draft goes according to plan. Like, kind of ADPs falling away, especially in the first couple rounds, right? Do you find yourself leaning toward more running back in the beginning or more receiver in the beginning?
Definitely more running back. I just think by nature of the game, I'm much more inclined to try to anchor my team down with these running backs. Now, if like Justin Jefferson were to fall to me at the end of the first round, I'm going to hop on that every single day. It's never going to happen,
100%.
but like if there's a player in my first tier that happens to fall to the end of the draft, then great. But I do like to go running back heavy in general to start my drafts because, I mean, we know this from experience year after year. It's so much easier to grab late round wide receivers. It's easier to grab wide receivers on the waiver wire and just stream. Like you can't do that at the running back position. So I like to have a healthy number of running backs in case they don't stay healthy. I like depth at the running back position, and I'll sort of fill in the rest. But yeah, I do favor running backs. Plus, I just like running backs. I love running backs. I love dudes just plowing through the offensive line. Like let's go.
Yeah,
All those
that's what
zero
football
RB
is.
people just left the show.
Yeah.
No,
Bye.
Yeah. See ya.
they were like, "What's this?" No. All right. So, kind of leading into the next question here, though. So, AJ.
Yeah. I was just gonna say, I kind of follow the same thing from what you guys were saying earlier with drafting your guys, and I'm a big proponent of that as well. And if it's early, it's early. I don't really care if it's somebody that I like and I'm putting in my in my teams, then I'm going to go after them. So, but going into this next question here, then, so assuming you will be going running back first, when do you usually take your second running back? Do you double stack, or is it?
I'll usually double stack. Depending on who's available. Again, I never pigeonhole myself, but if the running backs fell to me in the desired way. So like, for example, I was honored to join the NBC Sports Edge team to kick off their like annual fantasy preview. And I drafted a team, and it was a super flex league. I anchored my roster from the 102 with Patrick Mahomes, and then I came and I just went running back, running back, running back, running back, running back. And the people in the comments were going literally buck wild. But I went, I think it was, who was my RB1? I don't know. It was like Aaron Jones. And I just literally kept stacking. And then at the end of the draft, I pulled it all together, and I wish I could remember my running backs at this point, but like I'll probably take 2 running backs if back to back and not have any fear there. Cause again, like wide receivers just so deep. And running backs, there is such a clear tier break, right around like the 4th round. I feel like that tier break isn't necessarily there for the wide receiver position. So if I have my way, it's running back. I guess I do have a strategy. I don't know.
I mean, it does fall off pretty bad. And, I've tried to build teams in, at least recently with PPR and half PPR coming, full board, just trying to stack with running a good catching running back and then trying to build receiver depth. And I always get burned because I never have enough running back depth. So this year I'm just like, don't do what you usually do. Do the exact opposite. Totally doing a George Costanza here, and it's worked so far. Granted, we haven't played any games yet, but I like my teams this year. Like I'm very happy with the way they've turned out.
Listen to your instinct and then do the opposite thing.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
So-
I completely agree with you, Kate. And we did we did all these team preview shows in early July, and when I was going through them and looking at ADP numbers, just even like, and I know you don't have to draft off ADP like we said earlier, but this is almost from looking at the ADP numbers, you kind of have to take your running backs early, or you're just rolling the dice with like 5 people just hoping one lands, and it might work out, and that's how the zero RB people do it. But that's a risky move for me. And there's so many receivers going rounds 5 through 8 even, and I'm going like, all of these guys could finish wide receiver 2s, and if I get 2 or 3 of them, I'm in good shape. Of course, if you draft Derrick Henry and he gets hurt, like, okay, but like, you could draft Justin Jefferson, he could get hurt, then what? Like, okay, same thing. So, I guess there's always the argument that running backs get hurt more than receivers, but I don't know. I like to have that sure depth at running back more than anything. But let's kind of flip the switch here, and let's just play the game, right? So I think we're all kind of in agreement here. Kind of running back heavy is the way to go more than not, right? It does not say you have to, but let's just say, let's say the board kind of falls to you, and you're going wide receiver. Like you said, Justin Jefferson falls in the first round, so you're like 9 or 10 or even 12, right? Are you more likely to go running back, or are you just saying, because at that point, let's say, running backs come back to you, and let's just say every other team went running back, are you just going like, well, screw it, now I'm 0 RB, let's go? I mean, is that how we're doing it?
Yeah. And I really like just kind of following the way of the board. And I can't let other people's picks dictate mine. If there's a big run at running back, that probably means there's a really good wide receiver left on the board that's maybe fallen out of their tier. So maybe that's where I pivot. It's challenging, but I don't know. I kind of like that.
Yeah, no, I'm with you, and that actually happened to me in a draft of mine, to where running backs were just literally flying off the board. So I ended up starting pretty heavily on wide receiver, more so than I usually do. But what ended up happening is, right, when I'm usually reaching for receivers in those 4, 5, 6, 8, 9 rounds, a bunch of these other running backs who weren't being taken because all the other running backs were taken ahead of them, teams stacked 2 running backs, they didn't need the running backs, so they were all trying to pick the receivers. But guess what? I was loaded at receiver, and I ended up getting a whole bunch of good RB2s that I got one good RB1 who I was really happy with, and then all the RB2s I was just like, you know what? I've got 3 really solid RB2s. Like AJ Dillon fell because nobody else needed him. Ramondre Stevenson fell because nobody seemed to need him, and I was like, thanks. That's 2 right there. I forget the third one now, but that can also happen. So again, just another point to you gotta take what the board gives you type of deal. That's the big theme here, obviously, is you just gotta take what the board gives you. So
right.
Even if you go heavy receiver, you can do that.
Yeah.
Well, and I think
Definitely.
even at the end of your draft too, if things fall that way, and you're stacked at one certain position, or however that kind of falls, and however that board falls, the beautiful thing is that if you're in a league that trades, you can trade, which is awesome.
Yeah.
That's perfect. You have all the leverage in the world then to go and make a trade, and you're gonna be the one everybody's coming to, and it's gonna be a good time.
Yeah, unfortunately, I don't really play in leagues where people like to trade. There's one a year.
Yeah.
It's usually me, which is good, I guess. But yeah, it's hard to find people that will be willing to make moves that are, fair for everybody, if you will, I guess. So what about tight end here? Let's talk about the catcher of football. I mean, there's a lot of people that swear by taking Kelsey, Andrews, early to at least land one of those top tight ends. Um, we've seen the Kittles, the Wallers kind of come and go in there too. I mean, what's your stance on that? Do you like taking one of those two guys?
It's either it's either that, or it is just a crapshoot. Like it's either it's either Andrews, it's either Kelsey, or it's punt. And
Yeah.
for me, there's not a lot of room in between. I'm just not I've been burned so many times in that sort of mid-range tight end. And you know what? Like the difference between tight end 12 and tight end 24, not that significant, shockingly. And maybe that's going to change at some point, but there's really no reason, I think, if you're going to, look at how you should construct your roster, like there's no reason to invest in these mid-round tight ends because they just never pan out. There's always a pick. If you go back and look at your draft board at the end of the year where you're like, crap, I cannot believe I wasted my pick on, give me an example. What's a mid-round tight end that we were all in on like every single year? Tyler Higbee. Like Tyler Higbee
couple years
just
ago, Hayden
refuses to
Hurst.
pan out.
Yeah,
Hayden
Hayden
Hurst.
Hurst,
Yes.
yeah.
Like
They both have burned me bad.
and
I was
there are
gonna
those
say,
tight
there's
ends every year, every single season. There are those mid-round tight ends, the darlings that we all kind of fall in love with. Like, who would you say is in that tier right now? Probably TJ Hawkinson, Zach Ertz, Dallas Goedert.
Ertz, Goddard. I mean, Schultz.
Even Darren Waller. Like Darren Waller.
I'm out.
I would put Schultz above Waller. And Kittle, actually.
I get why, but I don't in my rankings. But I get why. I'm with you. Like, I get burned by those like 6, 7, 8 tight ends every year. But I'm actually look, if I don't get Kelsey and Andrews, which I just don't feel like I'm going that route this year. I love Kelsey, but I don't know, for some reason, just because it feels like we have less running backs that I can trust. I don't want to go Kelsey in the first round or even early second. It just feels like it just crushes your team, even though he has a huge advantage. Let me tight end premium, different story. But anyway, we'll get there. But Andrews, I'm kind of worried. He was really good with Tyler Huntley. He was okay with Lamar, and I get the volume should be there for him, but who knows? I'm out on Kittle and Waller. It is that Schultz and Hawk range that I'm like diving in this year. Those two, I feel like they're going significantly later, that I'm like, all right. And we've seen Hawk do it on a per game basis. That's why I like him. Schultz is, I'm not usually a vacated target guy, but I mean, there is legit vacated targets there in Dallas, and even CeeDee Lamb is kind of banged up right now. So like Schultz literally might be it for a few weeks. Like that could be a gold mine right there. The problem is when you get past the Ertz range, like if you want to even just take it one step further, the problem with that is like they're all super touchdown dependent. And yeah, we see guys come out of the, woodwork every single year, and they're always valuable. We saw Logan Thomas do it, right? We've seen, Green Bay guy, dang it, Tunyon, thank you. We saw Dawson Knox do it last year, but their touchdown rates are so unreliable. They're never going to repeat that, and we see it every year. So like people going and be like, oh, let's take Knox this year. Okay, good luck. I get the offense is awesome, but he had like a 30% touchdown rate last year. Good, that's not happening. So I actually kind of like Hawk this year a lot, just because I think the pure volume that he's going to see in that offense. I know they brought in some extra guys and they still have a whole lot of other weapons that are returning, but he's a focal point of that offense. He's still a focal point of that offense, in my opinion. I still think he's a very reliable guy. I don't see him falling much. Maybe he finishes tight end 8. You drafted him at tight end 6. That's fine.
Yeah.
I don't see much going much farther than that just because of his volume. But I think the second part of this question is what I brought up earlier. Is,
Yeah, with the tight end premium. I mean,
right.
do you change your thinking on that as far as not necessarily, oh, now I have to go out and grab early, or is it still the same kind of, if I don't get one of these first two, I'm just going to punt?
I mean, for me, it kind of comes down to that range. Like, I have this beef a little bit with like super flex and tight end premium a little bit, because I think we go a little bit too far in terms of then over prioritizing certain positions. Like, for example, last year, you would have had people investing very heavily in order to pick up any quarterback that popped up, like Davis Mills, who, like, nobody projected Davis Mills would be good for fantasy, but we all still wanted him because he's a quarterback and he should, just by way of the position, score those points. I think the same rush to the tight end position then happens with tight end premium, and they all get overinflated that direction. I really try to just stay level headed and not kind of go with the pack. If there's a rush for tight end because it's tight end premium, that's great. I'm not going to take a crap tight end though, just because it's a tight end. I'm going to still prioritize best player on the board. And later, if I need to make a trade after the draft to acquire a tight end and I've got all this leverage at every other position because I didn't take I don't know who's a tight end this year, like an Irv Smith Jr. I don't have interest in Irv Smith Jr. Like, I might be in trouble there, or like a Cameron Brate. I'm not going to take a Cameron Brate over, a decent wide receiver 2 or 3. I just don't. It doesn't make sense, and that's me overinflating Cameron Brate. I'm sure he's not going that high in tight end premium drafts, but it's just the point. Like, look at your roster and look at the quality of player you're getting, because minimum points times like 1.5 per catch. If they're not going to catch the ball that much anyway, you're not getting much of an edge. So, like, take the better player, and that's kind of my mindset throughout this entire draft. Like, anytime I'm in a tight end premium draft or super flex, is this am I reaching because I want somebody just at that specific position to fill that slot, or am I drafting a player that I think is actually going to be good? And I kind of take it from there. That's a really long answer. I'm so sorry.
No, you're
it's
fine.
good. That's I mean, I've seen it a lot in especially in Scott Fish too, where people have double tapped tight end with their first 2 picks. Not as much this year because it was such a crazy run for quarterbacks, but I've seen it in the past, and or even a couple rounds later, people might just do double stack and do quarterback, tight end, and it's like, okay, I hope that works. Maybe.
And it might. It absolutely could, but just like, it's not my style. It doesn't feel organic to me.
Yeah.
When I just kind of stack to stack, and it's not necessarily players I like. I'm not. It's kind of the same thing, in terms of whether when there's a run at a certain position, do I feel the need to then just draft that position to make sure I don't miss out? Like, I always try to be a disciplined drafter and do what makes sense for my team and not base that on other people and what they're doing at that position, or whatever the case may be.
Yeah. So you mentioned Superflex, and that's kind of where we were going to go next. But before we jump into that, just normal 1 QB league, like, when do you typically find yourself drafting your first quarterback? Like, assuming Josh Allen doesn't fall to like round 5, which seems crazy, right? Like this is not happening, but that would be an obvious one. But like, say quarterbacks go where they're typically going. When do you find yourself typically taking one, and kind of what quarterback range in the typical rankings would that be?
So, my general philosophy as a drafter, again, take it as it comes, but I always do try to employ the late round quarterback. I feel like it's not a surprise there. It's not a bold take by any means. That feels like it's sort of become even more mainstream to start to wait on that quarterback position. But if I'm not going to wait at the quarterback position, let's say I I'm always open to taking a quarterback, but the situations where I most often end up taking quarterback, maybe earlier than I usually would, it tends to be in that like round 5 to 7 range. And every single draft that I have taken a quarterback that wasn't a total punt, it feels like it always falls in that range, because my sort of goal is to get through some of those grosser rounds where like you're not yet taking flyers necessarily. You're still drafting players that might need to be in your regular rotation. They're not necessarily going to be straight up bench riders your whole season. Like you're still trying to get a starting lineup together in those first seven rounds. And there's sometimes a point between that 5 to 7 range where I'm like, I am not thrilled with the running backs on board. I don't see any values here. Wide receivers, if there's any guys that I like and it feels like I'd be reaching there, that's when I say, okay, is there a quarterback that I really like? Is there a play like, and I do the same thing with tight end, honestly. Is there a tight end here that I really like? It usually ends up being a quarterback. But when I've hit that range of just meh in that 5 to 7 round, if there's a quarterback I like, then I'll absolutely pull the trigger. I feel like in most of my mock drafts, that has usually ended up being like a, maybe a Jalen Hurts, a Russell Wilson, Trey Lance, depending on, sort of where, who you're drafting with and what, how high your league mates are on them. But it feels like that's the sort of range that I've been working with. And I'm always like, I always feel like, okay, as long as I don't feel like I'm taking away from like high-end talent at another position, sure, I'll go quarterback, and I don't mind that. And I feel like that's just the way I kind of like to roll. And I always end up liking my team. Again, it's all like I draft with my heart and soul. And I think that, it always ends up, I always love my teams. I always think I'm going to win every single league because I walk away from the drafts happy. And I think everybody should walk away like that.
Yeah,
So,
I agree with that.
I'm typically a wait on quarterback guy too. So funny, we did a show just before the expo with producer Mike LaPlante, Dylan, Mike Bonney, a whole bunch of other fantasy six-pack people. We did a draft on air, and I wanted Jalen Hurts in, I think it was round, what? When did you get Hurts in that league, AJ? I mean, it was literally like exactly the rounds you were saying, Kate, like 7, 8.
Yeah,
I mean, it was
well,
right
I wasn't
there.
in that one. Or are you talking about the staff league?
Oh, maybe it wasn't. Yeah, sorry, it wasn't you. I just always assume it's you because it's that was the mock draft.
I was watching it.
But anyway, so it wasn't him. It was the mock draft the next night. But yeah, so like round 7, 8, I thought Hurts was gonna roll back to me, and I was like, he went, and I was just kind of like, I'm out. I'll take whoever's left at this point. Like, I just waited until the 13th quarterback, and it was still Matt Stafford, and I was like, thank you. So
And sometimes patience can pay off.
So I loaded up, right? I loaded up on all the other positions, waited till like round 10, 11 to even take Stafford at this point. And then, I saw people who were taking like Josh Allen and Mahomes. I don't even remember the quarterback. I'm just making up the names. I don't think those two teams did it per se, but teams who took like top 5 quarterbacks were then taking backups later. And I went on this rant on the middle of the show. We were like 2.5 hours in. I might have had a couple of these in at that point, but I went on a rant like, why are y'all taking backups? This is stupid. You have a top 5 quarterback. You are never starting.
It's a waste.
Like Derek Carr. Like, I'm sorry. I know Derek Carr might be fine, but when are you starting him outside of a bye week? Like, who cares? And then in the very last round, I took Trevor Lawrence. So everybody's like, oh, hypocrite. And I'm like, okay, let's be real. So I took the 13th or 12th or 13th quarterback off the board, and he's already sort of injured. I had to have a backup plan. Like, who knows with Stafford? Like, he could just like blow out his elbow in week 2. Like, and then I'm screwed. So I kind of needed a backup plan. But like, what's your take on taking a backup quarterback, which is a very popular thing to do in drafts, especially like your more casual drafts?
I think definitely. You have to be really comfortable with the rest of your roster to be taking a backup quarterback. I never do it. I never would advise anybody to do it. Maybe in some of those more volatile situations where you do have a big question mark at the position. But looking even at the top 16 players on the board, if we're in a single quarterback league, even if I can't think of a single
well, what about like a Trey Lance? Like, you took Trey Lance as your QB1 at like QB, let's say 10, 11, 12, because that's kind of where he's going.
I'm good.
Would you take a backup there just in case?
No, I don't think that when we're looking at the range of outcomes for these players that you're drafting, let's say like QB, in the QB2 range, right? QB 12 to QB 24. That's a lot of QBs. Sorry. My God, that's like a mouthful. You would think I was having drinks, but I'm not. But like in that range, like what is the difference between a Derek Carr at QB 14 all that different from Trevor Lawrence at 20? Because I don't think so.
I don't think Lawrence is going 20. Lawrence is going like 15.
Okay, I'm on Fantasy Pros. Fantasy Pros. Oh yeah, this is updated 80, or it's updated ADP, but I guess I don't know how often they curate it. But the point still stands. Is the
I didn't realize
is the difference between Derek Carr and a Matt Ryan that significant? Again, I don't think so. Like, just let me play the waiver game, and we'll see how it shakes out. But
I think
I never
same guy.
I think unfortunately, in especially casual leagues, because there are so many teams that take double quarterback. When you try to stream, unless you've got one of the top 5, 6, you're just locked into them pretty much every single week. Like, I think you could go as low as Dak at like 8, even Brady at 9, assuming he actually returns to football. Who knows what's going on? As we talked pre-show, Rodgers and Wilson, like, even those are kind of locked in guys. But I think after that, they're all sort of like, they could be somewhat matchup dependent. And to that point, because so many teams in casual leagues take 2 QBs in their drafts, you're almost forced to take a second quarterback in those leagues. But I think in like our industry leagues, we're so used to teams not taking 2. So I'm with you, but I also play in a couple of casual leagues, like Family League, and they legit all take 2 QBs like before I'm done. Sometimes I get burned because
they
all
do,
start
but you know what?
2.
Let's say 11 of those 12 teams, you being the exception, take 2 quarterbacks. There's still a few starters out there in the mix. They might not be sexy, but what if one of those later round picks, you could have had what's a player that was going late last year that ended up paying off? I don't know. I would need to reference 2021 ADP. But like, if you you're just giving yourself another shot at depth at another position. Whereas again, like I think when you're drafting some of these QB2s, like it again, when looking at the difference between QB 24 to QB 28, not much of a difference there either. And I'm assuming
when you get down to that range, it's good luck.
It's all good luck, and I think that I just like you could have a gun to my head, and I feel like I just wouldn't draft a second quarterback. What I don't know. I can't help me. Am I drafting all wrong?
I only
If
did
it
it with
works, it
Stafford
works.
because a week ago, like we were still hearing about the elbow, and like he wasn't practicing still, and it was kind of like, I mean, I like Stafford, but if he doesn't actually play, I'd rather have Trevor Lawrence than whoever's going to be left. So I just kind of went last pick, whatever. There was literally nobody on the board. So
Yeah, I think
it's fair. I think
I don't normally do it. But in that case, I was like, all right, I'm fine.
well, even like, how about a Carson Wentz? Like, he's probably not going to go drafted in your fantasy league, but
probably not.
realistically speaking, like I'm gonna guess he's gonna sit on waivers, and he's probably gonna be pretty decent for fantasy somehow. There's always players emerging at quarterback, and that's just.
I also just kind of like Trevor Lawrence, so I just feel like he could
get a room.
He could also really leap into that QB1 territory. So I would have rather just taken him now.
Joe's obsessed with taking
run your fingers through his.
He does like his hair.
Yeah, just because yours is falling out doesn't mean you can go after somebody who's got way more than both of us combined.
By the way, when you said Trevor Lawrence's ADP was 20, I was like, what? That wasn't like that. Like, that long. Yahoo hates him. 27? Holy cow. I was like, oh, that's why. That is.
Yahoo ADP is actually pretty darn interesting. If you take a look on Fantasy Pros, Baker Mayfield, QB 16, feels literally insane.
Do they still think he's with Cleveland?
This is last year's ADP? This is nuts.
It's absolutely nuts. Let's see. Carson Wentz, QB 18. That's probably the reason that Carson Wentz averages
Zach
out
Wilson,
to
17. Yeah.
This Yahoo
doesn't make any sense.
You're wildin'.
Even with the injury, I like
we'll stop bashing Yahoo.
Better than a handful of.
Love you, Yahoo. Sorry.
Joe's new nickname for Trevor Lawrence this year is the Football Fabio.
Oh my.
Oh my gosh.
He wears too many.
We're gonna have a new segment on the podcast where Joe dims the lights and gets on a nice padded leather chair like Goodell and breaks open a love novel, and it will just be Fabio, but he'll have taped T-Law's face on it.
I've got a nice I think that's where we're going. Me. I could just turn the camera. Hey guys.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
No. Draw me like one of
We're gonna move on because this is getting awful.
Weird.
All right.
I'm done with the beer. On to the wine.
All right, let's jump into some risk-adverse discussion. AJ, take it away, man.
I guess. I mean, I'm kind of having fun making fun of you, but all right. So, being risk-averse, do players that have injuries or already in preseason or guys with a known injury history, do they tend to fall off your board, or do you take chances on them, based on their upside?
I think it's definitely dependent on the injury and where they end up falling in the draft. There's not a lot of players that are injured that I'll end up targeting in my drafts, like Ken Walker, for example. Mm-hmm. It sounds like he should be ready for week 1, but I'm not going to go out of my way to draft him at any point. I'm probably going to stay away there. Like Chris Godwin,
late, so maybe,
but
he was already going late. He could go real late.
He's got like 2 strikes against him now. He's already a rookie, and he's
missed the rest of the preseason. Like and that's assuming like a smooth recovery that he should be, which hopefully he has. But it definitely depends on where they fall. Like Chris Godwin, for example, it's really a case by case situation, but. Again, for Chris Godwin, like he's a guy that I'm generally staying away from because I think based on the reports, based on, the overall positive nature of the reports, I think people are going to be bought into Chris Godwin. But I also think that we need to temper expectations because he tore his ACL very late last year. And like, for example, Matthew Betts, injury analyst with the Fantasy Footballers, like he's projecting that he's going to have a pretty slow start to the season.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm thinking like my mindset with some of these players that might be off to a slow start because of an injury in the preseason or coming back from a season-ending injury last year, they might get off to a slow start. And maybe that's the time to target them in a trade so that you're not having to give up necessarily your draft capital, but you might be able to buy them low later on in the season and make an offer, to the manager of Chris Godwin, who's just fed up with the lack of production, and watch a second half explosion once he lands on your roster. Like, it's all dependent, but if they do fall low enough, you gotta take the risk, especially for a player that, like Chris Godwin, for example, has as much upside as he does. So very much feeling the board, but I'll take the risk. I'll if the upside I feel is significant enough, I'll 100% take a risk.
Well, so two guys that come to mind, especially since we're all running back friendly here. Christian McCaffrey and Saquon Barkley are still going real early, especially McCaffrey, number 2, sometimes number 1. Mm-hmm. Barkley is just creeping back into the back end of the first half, or back into the first round after, you're seeing him just truck people in Giants training camp. What's your thoughts on those guys?
I'm all
just
in.
Like nagging. You're all in, really?
I'm actually all in. I have no reservations about drafting Saquon Barkley. I have no reservations about drafting Christian McCaffrey. And a lot of that comes down to, like, I know, especially in the like fantasy sports physical therapy analyst community, like the term injury prone is a big no-no. But looking at the actual like issues with these guys, like it's not like Barkley has had the same injuries over and over again. He doesn't have a pattern of the same injuries over and over again. He's had some crappy luck, like some real bad luck, just awful. Finally came back from that torn ACL. Then he had the ankle injury and like it was nasty. You have to assume that he wasn't fully healthy after that point. And it's just been some bad luck. And I think Christian McCaffrey, similarly, some bad luck. But honestly, the more we get into the season, the more and more I'm all in back on Barkley. And I just don't have those concerns because sometimes you have bad luck.
Mike, why don't you speak up, man?
I just don't.
I figured I'd do it a more subtle way.
That was pretty funny. So,
Thanks for chiming in, Michael Plant.
I more agree with you on Christian McCaffrey. Like, his injuries have all been sort of like different. Weirdly enough, Saquon, if you go back through his injury histories, ankle sprain, hamstring, ankle sprain, ACL, MCL tear, same injury, same day, then ankle sprain. He's had a lot of ankle sprains in like.
But the ankle sprain was such a freak.
It was. He stepped on somebody.
Was a freak.
I get it.
Like that was such a weird. Like I throw that one away. Maybe he sprains his ankles plenty, but I mean to this point he's been pretty darn sturdy. Overall, he's carried a significant workload for the Giants. And I mean, prior to the torn ACL, I don't really think we had health concerns for Saquon Barkley in general. And I'm kind of like, I revert back to, if I didn't think before these two really unlucky injuries that he was injury prone, I don't think there's a reason to consider him prone to injury now. And you just got to hope that luck is finally on his side and that he is, making a peace offering to the people above, and that they're taking good care of that field, unlike the Chicago Bears.
It's like, hey, it's going to cost me a couple sprained ankles to break all y'all's ankles. Okay, fine. You know, whatever.
Ooh, I like that.
So-
You got to put that on a T-shirt and send it to
Send it to
send it
Saquon.
to Saquon. He might wear it, but just make sure that or like put it on some shorts, but make sure that
Roto-wear. AJ's got an idea.
yes, like
Don't
we
take
can
it.
do a
It's
whole
coined.
line.
It's mine.
Next year, by the way.
A
What's
whole
that?
merch
Make
line
bank.
that it's going to be
Yeah.
available at the expo
Oh,
next year.
I can
before
make
it, folks.
plenty of T-shirts for our store.
I'll hook you up with our contact over there. We don't control the
Excellent.
store, honestly. Like, I just
Yeah.
gave him our logo and was like, he just went to town. I was like, all right, have fun. I just want people to wear our stuff. I don't make any money off of it. It's just fun. Yeah, I don't know. I also just don't really like what I saw from Saquon Barkley when he came back last year. It was just sluggish. Like, honestly, his
That's
backup
what you
looked
get
faster.
for a guy coming back from it. Not everybody is Cooper Kupp. Not everybody just comes back and is like, boom, I'm back and I'm 100%. Like there are some like
Just ask Michael
Adrian
Thomas.
Peterson did it.
Or
Jeez.
Adrian
I mean,
Peterson.
he's a
the player
freak
that
and we
beat you
know
to
it.
Adrian Peterson sleeps in one of those chambers with T.O.
Hyperbolic chambers.
and a
Yeah.
T-Law novel. So there's some humans that aren't really actually human that play this game. He was
They're
one
both
of
in
them.
a lab.
Yeah.
That's where Adrian Peterson was grown.
Exactly.
In a petri dish in a
All
lab.
right, well, let's jump over here to some rookies. So, rookies are risky. We've never actually seen them play a real NFL down. We might watch them, preseason, go, oh, they look awesome. Doesn't always work out.
Yeah. Who's Houston?
How-
doing that right now?
There have been some really, really good rookies. We saw a bunch of receivers last year really step up, the year before. Running backs lately it felt like they're sort of second half players when it comes to them. But I mean, how in on the rookies are you typically in your drafts?
I don't mind them outside of rookie tight ends. Generally speaking, if your name's not Kyle Pitts, it's a big no for me. I'm not into rookie tight ends, not my type. Just too many intricacies of that position to expect anybody to make an immediate impact. But it really comes down to, I think, my evaluation of the prospect and, my evaluation of the depth chart and what is the potential for that player to make a role for themselves. Like Dameon Pierce. Before all of the hype on Dameon Pierce, I was in on Dameon Pierce. I was the original. I was the OG. Because you look at the player. I loved Dameon Pierce coming out of the draft. He was my RB3. Loved what he did in Florida, and I think if he had a bigger workload at any point in his career there, we would have seen his draft stock be much higher. So I think, my evaluation of that player, fantastic. Assess the opportunity. Okay, so we've got Marlon Mack. We've got Rex Burkhead. I'm going to write both of those off. Like, we already know what those players are. Like, the opportunity's there. So I'm going to take a risk. I'm going to make my flyer on Dameon Pierce. And same goes for these rookie wide receivers who can make an immediate impact. You do have to listen to some of the camp reports. You don't have to go crazy with it, but who can make an immediate impact? Drake London, he's a guy that I thought already out of the gate, like before we even knew he was going to be a Falcon, that he was a wide receiver that I thought probably out of any of these guys could make the most immediate impact, whether that maybe be, like an end zone role, which I think he'd be fantastic at. Treylon Burks, another guy that I think, you can use all over the field, but these are all players that I already projected to sort of have that skill set ready when they're taking the field, regardless of situation. And both of those guys come into a situation where the field is ripe for opportunity. So I look for the perfect mesh of my evaluation of a player mixed with opportunity. And if it's there and the combination is right, then I'll be all in.
Yeah, I agree with that. I mean, I don't have much problem taking rookies if I feel like they have somewhat of a role already carved out. I'm not buying into much of preseason what they're doing. I kind of agree with your stance there. Seeing who they are, before the preseason, knowing what they did in college, and obviously it's a different game. But Pierce, I said it jokingly, earlier, but he was a monster at Florida, and that's one of the teams I actually paid attention to and watched and have for decades. So the SEC in general always puts out talent. That's just like they're almost like
Never heard of
the
them.
junior varsity of the NFL, and then there's like a handful of other teams that fall in there as well. But I like rookies. I think it's somebody that not many people will be taking a chance on, at least not as maybe early as I'd be willing to for some of them.
And especially in home leagues, like I think
Yeah.
they
He's got
tend
the known
to
commodity.
Yes,
Exactly.
they like the safety. And I mean the problem about playing in industry leagues is that we all it's like an echo chamber. We all hype the same players
Yes.
and we all falsely inflate their ADP, and it's like this vicious cycle and it never stops. But like in your home leagues, you have, I think, more consistency. Like your home leagues probably aren't as responsive to some of these news blurbs and some of the Twitter chatter, and they're less volatile in terms of their player evaluations. And those are the places I probably walk away with the most rookies, just because like we're all degenerates in the fantasy Twitter space, and we're all so excited like to see what our favorite prospects that we graded highly, what can they do this year. But your father-in-law, he might not be as high on some of these rookies, and maybe he'll let them fall past you in the draft. That's me speaking this into existence, by the way, because I have to draft with my father-in-law soon.
Me
Nice.
too. They usually do let it fall.
Yeah. I mean, the other thing too with you said it great, is home leagues, bringing that up to it, because that's kind of what I was thinking when I was rambling on. But especially if it's one that's been going on, like a lot of the people in our home leagues have been in these leagues for 5, 10, 20 years. I mean, however long you've been doing them. You get to know the people, how they're going to draft, what they're looking at, and you can almost pick out who you think they're going to take in a given round just by looking at the board. And it's like, yeah, that guy's going to take him. This guy's going to take him. My rookie pick's right here. I'm fine. I'm still 8 picks away.
And kind of when people are going to like fall back to you versus when you maybe need to reach a little bit. Like I love home leagues. I love them for that reason. So fun, but it you kind of have to employ a different drafting strategy sometimes with home leagues, and really adjust your focus, because man, there can be some wild things that happen in home leagues. Some reaches, some picks just falling all the way down the board. Like you never know what you're gonna get.
Yeah. Diamonds in the rough. So speaking of, we got the ever famous boom and bust guys, basically the inconsistent people that we learn about from Mr. Bob Long and his awesome guide of consistency. We're looking at like a Mike Williams, an Amari Cooper. Something like that. Running backs, I don't feel like there's as many boomer busts. It's more of a receiver thing in my mind. How are you looking at these guys? Are you worried about the risk, or do you go after them?
Honestly, it comes down to like overall roster construction for me. If I've got some solid bases, like let's pretend that I started my draft back to back running back in first 2 rounds. I will totally consider if I think I have a pretty safe start to my draft. That's where I love to fill in with these boom guys because I know week to week, Saquon Barkley is going to have a pretty steady input of points. But like these volatile wide receivers, like if you have a steady base that can sort of sustain you through their down weeks, these are wide receivers that are also going to win you plenty of weeks. You might not know when they're going to come, but it's when you draft some other safe assets around them, that's when you can afford to take that risk. Or, maybe you go early with Mike Williams and then, I don't know, late, like back it up with a Juju Smith-Schuster, like in a full PPR. I would love to have that kind of boom with Mike Williams paired with the safety of a Juju in a full PPR format. Like pair your volatile guy with a safer pick down the run. And I think that sort of cancels it out, but gives you plenty of upside.
Yeah. I think if you're going to go after these guys, you don't want to go after all of them. Like you just can't build a team that way. It's just not.
You can, but it's going to be a bumpy ride.
You can, yeah. It might work for best ball every other third week or something, but you still want to be balanced and have guys, like you said, that are safe, that you know what you're going to get, and that you can still get later in the draft. So I'm all on board with that. Any thoughts, Joe?
I agree. I mean, we know my thoughts on Amari Cooper. I finally did take him for like the first time in 5 years this year. He finally fell to like wide receiver 35 in a best ball league by all means too. And it's kind of like, what a best ball league, I don't have to worry about it. Like he's gonna blow up for 40 points 4 times a year, and then I'm good. It's the other weeks I don't care. So
Joe,
I don't have to think about it.
I hate to break it to you, but Warrior Bowl is not best ball.
Yes, it is, isn't it?
No, it isn't. I can't let you make a fool of yourself any
Rule
longer.
number 1: know your league rules.
We should have topped off the show with that, honestly.
I was thinking that once we start going, I was like, wait.
No,
I gotta throw this in here somewhere.
Either way, it was still.
Either way, wide receiver 35.
No, I remember.
Exactly.
He's ranked way higher, even in my rankings. So I was fine with it there. I actually think he might have been my wide receiver 4. So it's kind of like, I mean, at that point, like, who cares? But I mean, Mike Williams, he blew up last year, but it was basically off of like 6 weeks. So I traded him after 4, so I was fine. Bye. I reap the benefits of it, but yeah, I mean, it's not horrible to have these guys. It's just I don't want to draft them early enough to where I'm having to rely on them consistently enough. I want points all year long. I can't just rely on you for 4, 5, 6 weeks of the season and have to figure out when those are, unless you're my flex player, and then that's a different story. So
that's actually a good strategy note. Draft the players that scored the most points all year long, and then you win. Right? It's it's essentially what we're doing here. That's the strategy, everybody.
Yes.
Well, and so another thing, right?
It's not a secret if you want to win.
It's not even just the most
players.
points all year long, because if you look every year, Amari Cooper is like top 12, top 15 receiver. But if you look at like consistency, right? You want them to be a consistent player. So you got to look at like more of a consistent / points per game basis type thing. And if they're like, maybe throw out a couple outliers, bad and good, and then do a points per game basis, figure out who was good throughout the entire season. Amari Cooper has basically never been that player. Mike Williams wasn't that player last year. You get rid of his top 3 games where he scored 30, 40 points sometimes in the first like 5 weeks of the season. He was a pretty mediocre player the rest of the year until like week 17. And guess what? If you had Mike Williams on your team and you were relying on him, you probably didn't get to week 17. So good luck. That's why I don't touch these inconsistent players unless they are valued enough, like you said, Kate. So next thing here, Here you go. Very important point. Yeah. Never trade for one of these boom bust players if they start hot. Yeah, I traded Mike Williams in a dynasty league and was like, "Bye." I've been trying to get rid of him for years. These have been driving me nuts. Finally got some picks out of him, and I was like, "See you later. I don't care." So you talked a little bit about the rookies with camp and how they're performing, but you were kind of referring to like the big dogs, right? The guys that got drafted really early and we were all kind of focusing on. But let's take a look at maybe some of these guys, and maybe not just rookies, but players getting a lot of hype in camp, right? Isaiah Pacheco is getting one. Brian Robinson's getting a lot of hype now that, Antonio Gibson is getting, kind of shit on, per se, for lack of a better terms. Do you kind of start buying into the helium a little bit of some of these players like Pacheco, maybe taking a stab on them, maybe a couple rounds before the last pick just to get them just in case? Or you just, it's just camp hype?
It definitely, like Isaiah Pacheco will not be on any of my rosters. Unfortunately, I get it. We all love an underdog story, but I also think I need to temper my own expectations. And it's like, there's a reason why we all have, reservations about hearing some of that preseason hype, because nothing is going to be truly simulating NFL gameplay like NFL gameplay will. Like, there's nothing that's going to actually solidify what they're going to be able to do on the field until you actually see them on the field. Like MVS, for example, it was getting great reports in minicamp back in April, and hasn't panned out. I think like these are brief snippets in time, and should you kind of listen to the beat reporters and all that? Yes. But, like, temper your expectations.
Yes.
And just reel it in, like take whatever the hype is and then bring it down, I don't know, like 30 to 40%. And, kind of assess the situation. Like, for example, Isaiah Pacheco, like, what are the actual chances of his pick working out? Not fantastic. Like 7th round picks, generally speaking, do not work out. They do not produce for fantasy. Like, could he make the roster? Absolutely. But again, comes back to like, what are their chances of actually producing this on the field? Like for Isaiah Pacheco, probably not great. I don't know. I try to take everything with a grain of salt. You need to be skeptical. You need to be, trust no one. #. Like I really, I listen to the hype. I'll, listen to, more so maybe the target trends and the snap trends. Like those are the trends that I think you need to look at for camp, and less about like, ooh, player X has made some really flashy grabs, or, ooh, like he's looking great between the tackles. Like that's all great. And you do want to hear those fantastic things. But I do tend to care more about like, okay, player X is playing with the first team. Player X is, has been targeted in the end zone on every single 2-minute drill. Like that, like that's the kind of hype that I tend to look at, and not necessarily the show-stopping kind of moves like that.
Yeah, I'm on board with that.
I got to admit, I have taken Pacheco in the very last round of like at least one league.
The issue is he's probably not going to last to the 10th round or to the last round anymore, because
well, it was actually
this vicious cycle.
Yeah. No, he's getting raised up really, really high, and like every single day is going higher and higher. Last round, I'm all right. We got Bo. What's up, man?
Yo.
Yeah. So I mean, like again, like if you can get a couple of these guys like in the last round, because I mean, let's be real, how many of your last round picks are really going to hang out on your team the whole year? Probably like 2%.
Yeah, maybe zero. Like,
So yeah, right. So Pacheco, like, I mean, he's getting a little hype. Sure, why not? You know, I'll take a chance. Andy Reid saying good things. I mean, but I do go back to, oh man, who was it? It was same team. What, a year or two ago? Everybody was just like off the charts, like for him. And I'm totally blanking on the name now, but he was a complete dud. Like barely got a snap. So I get you. Like, take it with a grain of salt.
I can't think of his name either.
I mean, it is a very notable topic to bring up because this happens. Like, we see guys like Pacheco getting drafted in the 10th round randomly. So, yeah.
10th round. Oh, my
as
God.
Scampers is saying here, ADP is going to keep climbing. We'll see.
It is. And it's the echo chamber, too, because then, like, as the hype builds and then, you know, some of the mainstream outlets kind of grab onto that name and the hype, and then it's just a never-ending echo chamber. But again, just go back to the you know,
yes,
like Darwin Thompson.
Oh, that was exactly the name. That dude got so much hype.
No, it was a D.
I couldn't think of it at all, but thank you, Scampers. That was phenomenal.
Just go back to like what the tangibles. I think that's probably the best way to say, or my best advice in evaluating training camp. Look at who is being targeted. Look at who is on the field with the first team, and don't necessarily look at the flashy plays, because there's going to be a lot of them.
Of course,
because there's not real tight defensive coverage in a practice scenario. So
exactly,
exactly.
But hey, last round, I'll take a stab here and there, but you know, any higher than that, I'm kind of out. So, all right, let's just finish off here, and we can kind of get through these a little quicker because I realize we're going a little long, but just some important. And I'm gonna throw this one at you. This wasn't on the sheet I sent you, but we talked about drafting backup quarterbacks, but that's not what I'm talking about here. So my question here is, do you fill backups before filling your starting roster? And mainly focusing on like running backs and receivers. So like, do you worry about getting say it's a 2 running back, 3 receiver, 1 flex league? Do you worry about getting all of your starting positions filled, or will you take a 4th, 5th running back before you fill all your receivers, if that's kind of how the board falls to you?
If it's how the board falls, and I truly think that there's a big tier break between maybe this running back and wide receiver X, sure. But I also think that's a time where you go back to roster construction, right? Like some leagues, you have to start 4 wide receivers and only 2 running backs. Like that is a league where you do need to take into account the fact that yes, I could have 5 running backs on my roster and they could all be fantastic, but I do need to start 4 running backs 4 wide receivers at the end of the day. So if it's a pretty standard format league, yes. But if there's any sort of weird scoring like that, I do take it into account and try to fill out my starting roster, because at the end of the day, you need a starting roster. But if it's just kind of like a standard construction of like your average fantasy league, I'm going to just, again, take what the board gives me. And if again, banking on some of those post-draft trades, shake things up after the draft, make some changes. Cause like, if you're the one with all the running backs, there are going to be people that need running backs. And maybe you can leverage some of those, your depth at that position to enhance your depth at other positions. And that's just how I like to play.
Yeah, I'm good with that.
And the same
way. All right. So the next one is, what's your main tool? Obviously, I think I already know the answer to this based on the show, but you like to draft with your heart and your mind and feel and whatnot. But do you use any kind of cheat sheets or rankings in particular, or league sync tools, anything like that?
So I do my own projections every season and sort of try to keep those updated as much as possible leading up to the draft. Kyle Yates has like this amazing projection builder tool, which I just absolutely love, and I've used that every year. But I build my own projections, and with that come rankings. I break them down into tiers. I think tier-based drafting is just the only way to go. So based on, my projections, I'll use my own rankings because I'm, I guess, just that confident in myself, and draft based on that. I'm not overly strict, but I do try to utilize the tiers appropriately. So like, if there's a player in my second tier available at, wide receiver, and maybe we're down into the third, fourth tier at running back, I'm gonna reach on that, second tiered wide receiver there. I think that's generally speaking the way to go. And no, I'm not at all strict. I'm such a free spirit.
Nah, I'm exactly the same way. And when you brought up tiers, like, I don't tier my rankings that we put on the site because they're consensus rankings, and it's like just pretty much impossible to do it that way. But with my own, I kind of have natural breaks in it, and as we've mentioned time and time again on the show, as AJ said too, is it really is, well, if this player is this much better than the next player and the next running backs, then fine, you need to take him. If it's the wide receiver, then yeah, like that's who you take. Like so that tier, like almost best value drafted is best player available, best value available, whatever you want to call it. There's many terms for it. That's the way you go, and
it's almost like a built-in like decision tree. Like
it is.
I always love those things where it's like, are you this? Go here if yes, go here if no. Like I feel like tiered rankings, that's kind of like a build your own adventure in and of itself. And I always feel like I have successful drafts when I do that.
What I hear a lot, right, is, well, should I draft A or B? And I go, well, I don't know who else is available, but if between those two, I guess I'm going A, or B, whatever. But, I also hear like, well, the rankings tell me I should. And I'm like, well, that's not necessarily. I have rankings. I don't draft off my own rankings. I do, but I'm kind of like you. Like, they're just a guide. Like, they're not a, like, if I don't draft player X over player Y, then you're wrong, because that's what my rankings say. Like, well, I'm going to rank Amari Cooper higher than I need to, than I want to, but because the end of the season, he's probably going to finish there. But consistently, why I don't want him.
And that, like, again, it comes down to like, who have I drafted already? Like, because if I've drafted, a player that I'm going to project to be maybe a little more volatile, like if Tyreek Hill is my wide receiver one, like I'm not going to go for Amari Cooper, even if he's there in my rankings, just because like my roster needs to complement itself. Like I want a balanced roster, and that's how I like to roll.
Roster build is such a huge thing. You have to have balance. So I'm glad you said that. So to finish off here, I know I think we were mainly focused on like 12 team leagues, but let's just say, so do you have any difference in strategy? Do you reach for quarterbacks or tight ends higher or lower based on 10 or 12 or 14 team leagues? You can do, I'm sure there's like 1,000 things you could say, but maybe just pick one or two to kind of share.
I approach, I think 8 team leagues and 12 team leagues pretty similarly overall, but 14 team is where I will start to prioritize that quarterback position a little bit more heavily, the tight end position. Because I do think that, though I don't think there's a huge difference between, maybe quarterback 14 to QB 20, it's still like there's a lot of competition for those bodies out there. And I want a piece of the pie. I don't want the last crumb on the plate. So that's the only sort of way that my draft strategy really changes is just, again, prioritizing that quarterback, prioritizing that tight end. and building my team more so around that than I do in any other format.
No, I agree. My only other thing would be like, I think in less than 12 teams, I think you can even wait on quarterback and tight end even more than your 12. So 12 is kind of like that middle ground where it's sort of like, all right, this is sort of like a balance. 10 is kind of like, I don't care at all. It's just like, y'all can
I'll
have
just
all
take
of
a
them.
body. I'll
just
take a live
whatever's
body.
left at the end, because I'm sure there'll be somebody. Maybe
Jay
less so tight end than
Blackalicious
quarterback.
starting week 1 for the Jets. So
who is streaming?
pencil that in.
Yeah. AJ, any thoughts on that last question?
No, pretty much the same way. My home league used to be 12, and then we lost a couple people, so haven't been able to build back up to the 12. So now it's 10. But yeah, it's just, it's simple to just go through and take a late quarterback, not worry about it. Late tight end, not worry about it. Just build depth. It is a keeper league though, so that plays into it a little bit too.
Yeah,
but
that's a different story. We weren't getting into dynasty and keepers tonight.
No.
The show's long enough. So, anyway, that is it. Kate, I want to thank you for coming on. Great discussion. I hope a lot of people learned a lot of things. I know even I learned a lot of things. So,
listen to your heart.
Right. We're off free spirits.
Indeed. And Joe likes books with T-Law Fabio.
Oh, jeez.
That's where his heart goes.
I'm sure there will be a meme of me somehow, like you made with
Uncle Jesse,
with Mr. Scott Simpson, Uncle Jesse.
Uncle Jesse. That was one of my many highlights.
As he's chiming in. So anyway, Kate, before we let you go for the night, just let everyone know where they can find you on the internet. And
it dropped down before I knew you, Uncle Jesse.
What you got going on this year?
Yeah, absolutely. You can follow me on Twitter at FFBallblast. I am the associate manager of editorial operations over at DraftKings Nation. Just launched our draft guide over there, so be sure to check that out. And more exciting news in the works. I'm just going to tease that. Right. So exciting news to come for me, and we're going to have a good season. So stay tuned and follow on Twitter for
awesome.
An announcement soon to come.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's in the ticker here. You see on the bottom of the screen. It'll also be in the show notes wherever you're listening or watching. So make sure you do that. Glad to have you on again. And yeah, we'll have to do it again soon.
Thank you, guys.
All right. Thanks, Kate.
All right, AJ. So yeah, man, that was a fantastic show. I love drafting talk strategy. That's my thing. As Kate said earlier on, man, this is my show. I love it. Like I said, if I could draft all summer every day, I would if I could, but obviously not practical. Yeah. So Mike's trying to jump in. What's going on here, Mike?
Oops.
Right, well, that's it. That's it for the show. I think next week, let me look up the schedule here. Oh, we got a fun one. Mike, you got some work to do. We're doing a fantasy game show action. We'll figure it out. It's me and AJ.
Survey says.
Guest.
I was actually working on that a little bit behind the scenes.
I don't think we're gonna know what's gonna happen. We're just gonna get surprised, and hopefully we don't make a fool of ourselves. Well, maybe we do hope we do, because that'll be fun, right? So,
what do you mean? You make a fool every week?
Yeah, I was gonna say, who's to say we don't do that already?
I don't know what you're talking about. All right, what's going on here?
I don't know.
Getting more comments. Yeah, thanks, Scampers.
Thank you, Scampers.
So, all right, that's it for the show. Good night, everyone. Peace.